Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Tarot Therapist. My name is Josh, and such a pleasure to have you here today for this video essay on the victim archetype. For those of you that don't know me, I work as a drama therapist and a life coach. I blend tarot with therapy, all with the purpose of aligning mind, body, and soul. This is a brand new format for me. I don't often do video essays, but if it goes well, if you like this content, I'll of course do more. Traditionally on this channel, I offer monthly tarot card readings, all with a therapeutic twist. I offer them to each of the Zodiac signs. So if you've not seen yours, make sure you check it out after this video, of course. But in this new style of video, I intend to explore psychological themes, all with the goal of offering you a toolkit of expanding your spiritual growth, your self-development, and self-actualization. So of course, if you like this new content, you know what to do. Please do let me know in the comments, like this video, and subscribe to this channel for all future updates. With the pre-YouTube spiel out the way, let's take a deep dive into the theme, the main event of this video. In today's cozy corner of self-discovery, we're going to look at the why me mentality, and we're going to find ways to get out of it if we identify that we are in it. But Josh, what is a victim archetype, I hear you ask? Don't worry guys, I'll take a moment to define it. To begin with, let's talk Jungian psychology. For those that don't know Jung, he was one of the OG big dogs of psychology. He's one of my personal faves. He saw archetypes as universal ancient symbols embedded in the human unconscious. So when it comes to the victim archetype, Jung saw this as a sneaky little character in the back of the mind, pulling the strings of our thoughts without us even knowing. Often in these moments we feel powerless. We love to blame others for our problems, and we're unable to come up with constructive solutions to change our reality. So essentially what Jung is suggesting is that archetypes exist within our unconscious as a form of code. They're programs that make us operate without us even realizing they're there, in which case they have an autonomous influence over us. For example, you might have the victim archetype taking influence right now. There might be a sneaky voice in the back of your head going, "Why me? This is so unfair. Things never work out for me. I always try, but it just never happens as I want it to." Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." So here we can see how the victim archetype might be operating behind the scenes, lurking in the shadows. It might be a voice that encourages us to make bad decisions. It directs our choices until we decide to shine a light upon it. So, how do we shine a light on it, I hear you ask? Well, my friends, the way that we do this is first to identify it. Now, this part is a little bit tricky because it takes practice, focus, and dedication. It requires a certain commitment to ourselves. We have to observe the parts of ourselves that are speaking, all of them. So this is a form of meditation. We begin to witness the opinions of our inner world. This particular voice might not be that easy to find. Have you ever walked into a room with a hum and you've not noticed that hum's there, and then someone turns off a machine like a computer or a refrigerator, and all of a sudden it goes quiet? And only when it goes quiet do you notice it was there in the first place? Well, the victim archetype voice could be as normal in your everyday life as that reverberating hum of the machine. So at this point, we have to listen with patience and compassion, because chances are this particular voice started speaking at a time where one didn't have the capacity or self-awareness or knowledge to understand this emotion and process it effectively. This voice might talk badly to you. It might put you down. It might tell you you're not good enough. It might tell you you're scared. It might also make excuses as to why you can't do things. It might blame others for your situation. It might not take any responsibility for anything. It's always somebody else's fault. If we consider this truthfully, we can all access a part of ourselves that has this voice. For some, it might be really loud, and for others, it might be quiet. But you see how the archetype is universal. We are all impacted by it somehow. So, do not fear. There is a way to free yourself from this bind. Now, before we go on, I just wish to say that this video isn't intended to shame. In fact, it's intended to inspire, because my hope, my purpose is that these videos encourage you to make a life that you want and not be held within these binds. And I bring all of this from a point of reference and personal experience. I myself have a relationship with the victim archetype. I've experienced this. At one point in my life, it was unconscious. I used to love being the victim, telling my friends all of this was going wrong for me. And part of me loved that process, loved that story. But then I made it conscious. I shone a light on it, and now I work with it. So if I'm feeling scared or afraid, which often I do, I have a conversation with it. And the next part of this video is how I do this. And I'm going to share it to you with a story, the story of Moses. So picture this. Long, long ago in ancient times, way before YouTube and TikTok even began, Moses was living a pretty good life. He was the shepherd for some sheep. He loved his wife. And he enjoyed spending his time laying in the sand, observing the beautiful landscape around him. That is until one day God tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Moses, you must free the Israelites from the Egyptians. You must free them from bondage." Now, of course, when this happened, Moses replied to this burning bush that appeared before him and said those two precious words, "Why me?" Moses at this moment found himself in that victim archetype. He did not think himself worthy of such a monumental task. Maybe he was operating from a space of humility. Yet equally, we can consider that maybe he just didn't think he could achieve the task that was prescribed to him. Maybe he didn't think he was good enough. In this story from the book of Exodus, God spends days, if not weeks, trying to convince Moses that he is worthy, that he has been chosen to level up through this experience. A long time is spent trying to get Moses to realize it's his duty, his role, to liberate the Israelites from bondage. Okay, so I'm not here to give you a history lesson, and I'm also not here to talk about God. I trust that you have the capacity to align this with your particular belief system. But as I mentioned before, I'm a drama therapist, and therefore I like to tell stories. In drama therapy, we tell stories because they hold within them archetypes, symbols, and metaphors. When we listen to a story, we can apply our own lens to it. We can project our experience onto it. Sometimes particular characters or experiences might resonate with our own personal story. The beautiful thing about stories is they're separate from us, therefore they're not inherently personal. We might listen to a story with a group of people, so they're shared, yet our own experience of it makes it inherently individual. In this story, as we explore the victimhood mindset, you might identify with Moses, wanting to be the savior, to free the Israelites, those that are in bondage, from the situation, the Pharaoh. Maybe you might not see yourself worthy of such a task. Maybe that's too much of a risk. Maybe there's a sense of safety, confined and bound within the sense of the realm that you know that was given to you. But if at the same time you are simultaneously sat there saying, "Why me? This is so unfair. I didn't choose this. I wish things were different," then maybe we can explore ways through this story for how to take responsibility, to make action and change in a way that's meaningful, in a way that's exciting, and my personal favorite, a way that's empowering. And I also believe that a part of you wants this because you're sat here watching this video right now. All right, this is where it starts to get juicy. We've already considered the role of Moses, and we are identifying the fact that maybe we need to save ourselves from the oppression. We understand we're oppressed, we're feeling hard done by, like the Israelites that need saving. We've identified the injustices of our lives, but we're willing to make a change, to take responsibility. But there's one character we're yet to look at, the role of the Pharaoh. Who identifies as the Pharaoh in this situation? The immediate response is to pin the Pharaoh on the external oppressor. The system, the matrix, our partner, the family member, the boss. But that feels a little bit too easy. Now, of course, there are certain truths in this, but by thinking in this pattern, we're not really getting ourselves out of the victimhood archetype, are we? We're still pointing the finger at the external, something other, and we're not really taking responsibility for change. So, as an exercise, I'm going to ask you to consider the humanity of the Pharaoh. After all, let's be honest, at this point we're probably already the expert of analysing the psyche of the other, their vileness, how they've let us down, why they must be doing it, what their attachment style's like. We're good at looking at what's happening in the other person. So let's just take a moment to remember that the Pharaoh is a human too, with his own suffering. He does, after all, lose his son in this story, which feels like a massive sacrifice to give up what he knows, his safety net. He's a human with complexes, traumas, and his own unique baggage. So Pharaoh's task in this dynamic is to be the one to let go. He has to unbind himself also. He knows that by letting go of the slaves, he will have to take responsibility to build his own kingdom, to make his realm himself. He can't rely on others to do it. He can't rely on others to save him. He has to be the one that saves himself. So we can see how here the oppressor has to give away their power. They have to willingly move into a realm of uncertainty, unsafety, so that they can grow. But it's at the opposite end of the spectrum. Maybe he's afraid of letting go because of his victim archetype taking hold of him. So here we can see the magnitude, the healing abilities of the story. They awaken symbols that are powerful. They conjure up a brutal honesty that's required of us as we develop along our path of spirituality. In order to embark along this quest of psychological healing, we have to get honest with ourselves. We have to get truthful with ourselves. So now, let me ask you a question. Is there a part of you that operates like the Pharaoh? A part of you that chooses not to let go, to hold onto the same paradigm, the same narrative? Maybe you feel comfortable in the safety net of the kingdom that you're in, but maybe deep down you know within you have the capacity for growth. So, if the answer is yes to any of the above, how can you awaken your inner Moses and turn to your inner Pharaoh and ask to be let go? And equally, how can you be your inner Pharaoh and be brave enough to take responsibility to let that version of yourself go and to move into a new paradigm? The moment that we choose to accept this is one of the most powerful moments on our journey towards becoming. And this is because we shine a light on our victimhood. We become aware that we simultaneously have been unconsciously playing the role of the oppressor and the oppressed, oppressing ourselves by keeping us in this narrative. And this can be a really tough pill to swallow. We have to accept that we can no longer fully blame others for our situation. All that anger, all that blame, all that finger pointing that's going outwards suddenly has to go inwards. We realize that we've been holding a shadow, and other people in the external, other situations have been holding that for us. We're putting a light onto our shadow. We're making it conscious. We're integrating it, and therefore we are healing. This is where we take responsibility, where we hold ourselves accountable and begin to make steps towards making choices that are in alignment with the true purpose of our soul, why we're meant to be here. Now, I'm aware that this is a paradox because we're holding opposites in our psyche. It can all get a little bit confusing, so I've decided to break this down a little bit further for you using tarot cards. And I've picked 3 cards that I believe offer a step-by-step program in order to do this process, to release ourselves from the victim archetype. So the first step is acceptance. And the tarot card I've chosen to symbolize this is the infamous Devil card. When the Devil card appears in a spread, we have to acknowledge any narratives, any stories that our ego is holding on to. Sometimes this can be painful, stark, honest, brutal. But we have to understand these stories we tell ourselves and how they might not be allowing us to evolve and grow. They might be keeping us bound in something that isn't good for us. Like I said earlier, this is the point where we listen to the noises, what's coming up for us. It can be hard to identify, it can be confronting. So in these moments, be patient with yourself, have care. Honestly, compassion towards self is one of the best paths of healing. It's also not an overnight fix. This voice comes up again and again and again, but the more we become aware of it, the deeper and better our relationship becomes with it. So when we've done this, or we're in the process of doing this, we arrive at step 2. and that is taking responsibility. The card that I've selected for this is the 8 of Air. If you look at this card closely, you'll see a figure bound to a log. If you look even more closely, you'll see that it's the figure holding onto the rope, therefore keeping himself bound. So here we can imagine that the figure is the Pharaoh. All he needs to do is let go and free the Israelites. And this card captures that pivotal moment where we choose to transcend the narratives of the past. At this moment, we get a grip of our victimhood. We empower ourselves, and we ultimately become responsible for our lives. This is when you begin to start paving your own journey, choosing the life that you want. In these moments, we are satisfied because we feel brave enough, because we love ourselves enough to be active and responsible in making the change. And this brings us to step 3, liberation and soul expansion. Here you will see the World card. Look at this figure glow. They are connected with oneness. In the tarot, when this card appears, we have reached the end of a journey. We've completed a lesson. We've closed some form of loop. We understand that we are interconnected with consciousness. We are a part of the grand story. This is a huge aha moment where we feel that joy and that bliss of actually letting something go. We realize how silly it was and that we didn't even need to be holding on to it in the first place. In the story of Moses, this reminds me of the part where he parts the Red Sea. Yet for you, you're symbolically parting the mental Red Sea. So, exciting times indeed. Whenever I've had this moment, this journey, this process in my life, I'm often sat with a bit of a juxtaposition, because on the one hand, I'm really relieved that I'm no longer bound by this narrative anymore. Yet simultaneously, I've been made aware that I've carried a wound for so long, which can bring up some realms of grief. So it's important to, again, be careful with yourself as you process this. It's not necessarily a smooth path, but if you navigate it with awareness, with consciousness, with self-love and healing, you'll find your way okay. Now, before we conclude this liberation discussion, it's important to also hold some critique for what I'm presenting. Some people believe that the victimhood narrative is important because it encourages empathy and brings together community. And I completely agree with this. It's very important to do this. It's very important to honor our truths, to understand our stories, to accept what's happened to us. And this is part of the journey, as I've alluded to previously. So here's the crux of the situation. We have to acknowledge our truths, we have to accept our reality, we have to know our story. Yet equally, we cannot allow ourselves to be defined by it. There's a balance. We have to remember that suffering, that bondage is universal. We all do suffer, yet for every individual it's relative. Of course, there are people who are sat in extreme realms of suffering, real victims having a really bad time. And in this moment, I hope you join me by extending a prayer of peace in your heart, your mind, and your soul, that every human being achieves liberation, that no one suffers, and that we get peace on this planet. So I acknowledge this, that truth. Yet we should also not use this as an excuse to not do our own work, to not acknowledge our own darkness, to find a time, if we can, to look within, to shine a light on our own Pharaoh, offer that side of ourselves love and healing, rather than focusing explicitly on the external. After all, and I always say this, the only person we truly have real control over is ourselves. So this process that I've shared with you is aimed at those individuals that are seeking to develop, seeking to grow, seeking to heal, seeking to be but a small bit of light and sharing that with the world. And I hope that these sharings of these images and these stories has offered a way for you to understand some of the mechanisms and the vastness of our beautiful yet complicated psyches. I think that the unconscious, from what I understand of it, is a never-ending journey. This spiritual evolution is like Pandora's box. We uncover one thing and another and another. And the further into it we go, the more satisfying and light we feel along the journey. The more empowering it is, the more exciting it is. and the more liberating it is. So this is my message to you. Find your own inner Moses. Part that mental Red Sea. Break free from the victim narrative. Embrace your power and turn that why me into a why not me. If you enjoyed this journey of self-discovery and you'd like to see more content along the same themes, please do let me know in the comments, like this video and subscribe to this channel. I'd be very grateful. Keep shining.